Good evening to each one present. I hope you are all safe and fine and ready to learn a new chapter. We go to a new chapter today, that is international trade. In the strict sense of the term international trade, these are not the 5 units that you study is not actually the international trade in the way the economic students study. But these 5 units are specifically designed to suit your chartered accountancy course. For example, what a chartered accountant should know in respect of international trade. So only in the first chapter will we give only certain theories. Only in the first unit we give some theories. But later we are going to, the broad aspects of international trade. That is, it is more or less general knowledge regarding international trade, It is actually the environment of international trade that you are studying in this chapter. Not like what economic students study. Probably only the first chapter has theories and we go to the first chapter. Okay, wish you happy learning. And we now start what is international trade. We are all used to domestic trade, that is, trade between domestic entities. We have a market, domestic market, a market for goods and services. Then we have a market for financial instruments and financial products. Okay, we have a market for all types of services. Then this trade is in the domestic market is much less complex when you compare international. As you know, international trade is trade between two countries. Trade between countries, okay? And what do they trade? They trade goods, merchandise, they trade services. Countries trade in resources. Resources are productive resources, okay? That which is used for production. Say for example, if trading takes place in inputs, factors of production, then it is trade in resources. Let us quickly go to some differences in domestic trade and international trade. It is briefly given in your book, but this might bring you more number of points. This is just to, introduce you to this particular topic of international trade. These are all points which you know, and we are only just revising what is the distinction between internal trade and international trade. Differences. Maybe we'll take just 4 or 5 minutes and just summarize what is the difference. After that, we will go to why do nations engage in international trade, and what is the advantage of international trade, and what are the arguments for and against free trade or opening up the economy for trade. Then we go to a few theories. This is we are going to do today. So first let's see what is difference between internal trade. It is different countries. I'll just mention the points because it's not very tough. Different countries, different currencies. Okay, different currency. All countries have their own domestic currency. And so we trade in different currencies. I mean, people who trade have actually different currencies. And whenever you engage in domestic trade, there is nothing like exchange rate risk. The exchange rate will not go up or down because rupee is the legal tender here and all domestic entities are doing trading in rupee. So there is nothing like exchange rate risk. And also in any domestic trade, there is no impact on the forex reserves, foreign exchange reserves of the country. When people engage in foreign trade, it has its implications for foreign exchange. That is one crucial difference because of differences in currency. Then, as you know, you would have studied by this time procedures, formalities, documentation, all these words you know, procedures, formalities, documentation, mode of payment. Okay, in India, subject to certain upper ceiling, we can make payments in rupee. But here, at least, it should be either by letter of credit, or by a bank, or by bill of exchange. You know, the mode of payment is also different. Then the rules and regulations, that is when, of course, there are rules and regulations for domestic trade, but there are more stringent rules and regulations in the case of international trade. Okay, for example, India has certain list of items which are totally prohibited. Okay, like lots of then modes of transport. Domestic transport is not complicated because we can make use of domestic services like trucks, etc. Okay, and all types of carriers. But here, distance is more and the mode of transport is more. Mode of transport should be different from what we use because usually shipping is involved. Okay. Then the operating cost is higher when compared to a domestic transmission of goods or transport of goods. Operating costs are high, cost of packing is high, cost of forwarding is high, cost of clearing, because when once goods come, you know, cost of clearing is high. It involves again duties at their customs duties. It attracts customs duties, export duties as well as import duties. Then going to a type of customers, for example, if you trade domestically, you know within the country, you know the nature of the customers because you are a domestic entity. But here, European customers will be definitely different from Southeast Asian customers. Chinese customers are different from customers in some other country. So, culture is different, customers are different, practices, that is what is meant by customer heterogeneity. Customers are different. Then there is uncertain demand. We know about domestic demand, you know, such goods and services once produced will be able to sell. But here, uncertain demand, okay, because of customer heterogeneity, right? Then, in business practices of different countries, there will be different differences. Accounting differences will be there, okay? Then, political systems will be different. Not all countries may not have democratic setup, okay? So, the political system will be different. The language will be different. And there is need for compulsory insurance, okay? Domestic goods are not compulsorily insured, okay? Especially short distance trade. Compulsory insurance for which transaction cost you have to incur expenses on compulsory insurance. Then a foreign trade is relatively higher risk when compared to domestic trade. Then again, the intervention by government in trade is much more than the intervention in the case of domestic trade. We have covered so many points, but it is very simple. Okay, lot of intervention. Like what can be imported, what can be exported. Okay, and what is the tariff or the duty of such and such goods. Okay, what should be encouraged, what are the industries to be protected. Then we prohibit the import of such things. Okay, so lots of rules, regulations and government intervention. And there is protectionism. It is a new word. At this point you don't have to worry because in the coming next chapters we are going to learn about protectionism is the policy of protecting domestic industries from external competition. So protectionism is another problem. Then comes the second part of our study will be the argument in favor of liberal international trade. What is liberal international trade? Why do we can always purchase goods and services domestically, but we procure also internationally. For example, we can buy a mobile phone produced inside our country. You can buy an imported mobile phone. You can buy a car produced inside the country, inside the domestic territory of our country. Some people prefer to buy from abroad. Okay. So, liberal international. Some people argue that liberal international trade is not at all good. There should be restrictions and barriers. That is, we should not allow goods to come freely. Okay. There should be barriers of entry for the goods. All goods should not. Some people, they are very liberally argue for a very free trade. Free trade is reduce these barriers, and free trade or liberal trade means let goods and services freely enter our economy and also go out of our economy. If export is profitable, export it. And if you can get something cheaper and better in another country, buy it from there, and that is free trade. Okay. And so, let us first of all, these are all economic arguments, cultural arguments. So, mostly we will be concentrating on economic arguments. Okay. Now, hereafter, you should be very, very attentive because we have to go fast. You will find in your textbook there are 23 arguments given in 8 points, 23 arguments given in 8 points, and 22 arguments against liberal trade. Because if you can look into your book, you can find, even though it is given only as 8 points, actually, there are 23 points included in that. So, we'll just fast go with these 23 points. The first question is, why we should favor liberal international trade? This is liberal international trade. That is, allow goods and services, allow our domestic buyers or people in the domestic economy, allow them to buy as much as good or resources, inputs, factors of production, people, services of banking. So, let us buy it, that is liberal international trade. So, I will not be following the pattern given in your book. But I have divided it into different subheads so that it is easily covered. The first argument is, whenever there is liberal international trade, economic efficiency will be. Okay. So one argument is economic efficiency, economic growth. Efficiency will lead to growth definitely, and growth will lead to rising income. Rising income means better standard of living, and the economy is going to be better. These are economic arguments. So let's go one by one. For example, the first argument is, whenever there is international trade, there is wider market. Okay, what is the meaning of wider market? The market is extended, the size of the market. I am producing not for my domestic economy, for example, within the boundaries of India. I am producing for the entire globe, or I am producing for the another 2-3 countries. Okay, and I have a wider market. I can always produce on a large scale, because when the size of the market is less, we can only produce less. But if I have a scope of selling it elsewhere, I can produce on a large scale. And when I produce on a large scale, there are economies of large scale production. What is economy? Economy means advantage. You know, when production is conducted on a large scale, probably those who are studying economics will remember the cost of production, okay? The cost of production consistently declines. You remember when we studied natural monopoly, you remember electricity connection, water connection, when things are done on a very large scale, you know, large scale procurement is possible, then division of labor is possible. What is division of labor? Division of labor is dividing the entire job. Here it is not job, we can have departments, we can have production units, okay. So, extended division of labor. Not that one person, division of labor I did not complete. Division of labor is dividing the job into different processes, okay, and entrusting each person or each set of persons with that job. You know, now teams are, you know, in our parlance, teams, okay, each team is managing and that team becomes an expert, okay, like that. Think of a global production possibility, a production possibility in the entire world. Definitely, we can use extensive division of labor. And in that process, you know, this division of labor enables, you know, efficiency. Those who are doing marketing, you know, they become efficient in marketing. So that is why qualitative benefits, that is, it increases the efficiency of the labor or the human resources. And quantitative, for example, there are many advantages like larger scale procurement, larger scale transportation, and so on. Then scope for mechanization, use of machines, specialized machines, specialization of machines and people. Okay, just as I said, people who are into research can keep doing research. People who are into production can, okay, in production management they will produce, and people who are into marketing will market, okay. And increased use of automation, same as mechanization, okay. Then these are the advantages of producing on large scale. And what about, you know, what about the implications for product quality? Because you have lived only for a few number of years, you may not be able to trace, you know, how quality of goods improved. You can ask your parents or grandparents, okay. Years back, you know, what poor quality goods we used to consume, right? Gadgets, crockery, everything, you know, every good and service, banking service, telecommunication service. I told you know, when telecom department was the only one who was providing it, inefficiency. These trains that are running were not air conditioned, okay. The quality of goods. So whenever there is international trade, there is wider choice. You find you go to a good supermarket, you get imported vegetables, okay. Wider choice, right from vegetables to very heavy, say for example, road rollers and other earth movers. Okay, so wide choice of products and services for consumers. We had only one life insurance corporation earlier. We have 24 now, isn't it? Because we allowed foreign insurance companies to come. What about banks? There are so many banks now, banking services. Inclusive banking is there, okay. Goods and services. And what about these products? Innovative, good products at lower prices. Haven't you noticed that secularly, that is for a long time, prices are actually becoming lower and lower. Okay, in America, the calculation is, how many labor hours are required to buy a particular thing. Say, for example, a refrigerator. I will bet that 20 years back, if you want to buy a refrigerator, you had to work one ordinary employee had to work at least 5 or 6 months. That is, now secularly prices are falling. Okay, innovative products, lower prices, quality of goods. For example, it is not only the imported goods whose quality rises, domestic goods also improve in quality because they have to compete with imported goods. What is the challenge of BSNL now? What is the challenge of all the producers? That is compete with the goods that are coming into the country, because they have to compete internationally. They have to think globally, right? And so, again, if you want to sell globally, your product should be good in international, in global value chain, right? So naturally we would try to produce goods which are saleable in other countries. Naturally, domestic people also have access to foreign goods, and if they want to enable us to buy, they should produce good quality products. Again, there is an overall increase in demand for goods and services. Okay, and so naturally production can be done more efficiently. Then we go to the next category. Okay, we have covered now. What are the two things we covered? First of all, come on, wider market, division of labor, all those points. Second aspect is about the quality of products. Third aspect is, if a question is asked, you should be able to summarize different points and write. Okay. Productive efficiency or productivity gains. What is meant by productive efficiency? There is increased competition because you have seen what was happening to Chinese goods and goods coming from other countries. Okay. So when goods come from other countries, not only China, from different countries, the goods produced in the country, inside the country by factories or producing units, or the services provided by domestic entities, domestic producers, they need to face competition. And what happens is, in this competition, they have to survive. Okay? So what is it that usually producers do not have much control on market price. Whenever there is competition, the market will decide the price. Then what is it on that you have control on? As a producer, you should have control. You can have only control over cost. How do you control cost? By efficiently using all types and kinds of resources available. Put all resources to the best possible use. Put your human resources to the best possible use. Put your machineries to the best possible and productive use. Adopt all types of cost reducing business practices. Cost reducing business practices. If there are excess laborers, send them away. Okay, all these, policies of, cost cutting is actually the result of increased competition, survival. Businesses have to survive, okay, and so they will adopt better technology, right, and greater efficiency in the use of our natural resources, our human resources, our financial resources, okay, because we can get access to new markets. And when we go to new markets and new materials, you can buy new materials. And if you want to reduce cost, how do you reduce cost? Buy raw materials and semi-finished products which are inputs for your business. for your industry, for your production, okay? Buy it at the lowest possible cost internationally. Right, buy it at the lowest cost inputs and components, and you get it at competitive prices. You don't have to depend on anymore. You don't have to depend anymore on domestic suppliers alone. You can source globally, and domestic suppliers also know that. So what will they do? They will increase the quality of supplies that they make. So lots of technological change, computerization. In 1970s, there was nothing like computerization. And in fact, there were so many people were against computerization, but still we had to do it because we need technological change. Okay, we need innovation, right? Innovation is application of an invention. An invention becomes an innovation when you apply that in your production or in your service process or wherever. In your teaching you apply innovation, because this is innovation that we are applying now. Okay, invention being applied for teaching. Okay, greater investment, you will keep on doing greater investment for product development, more research. How can you improve your productivity? Okay, and so these are all advantages of competition that is coming. So that is one set of questions that can be asked. How does an economy benefit from competition from other countries? I mean, external competition. Competition from goods and services produced outside the country. Then, if you are exporting, just like you are importing, you can export also. What do you get in return? Foreign exchange. Okay, why do we need foreign exchange? Because we need essential imports. We need imports of manufactured goods, fine. We need imports of capital goods. 80% of all requirements of our crude oil has to be imported, isn't it? And so we need foreign exchange. So if you open up the market for exports, you will get foreign exchange. Then next that is the result on a foreign and an exchequer. What is the effect on exchequer? That is, you can secure foreign exchange by exporting commodities once we have free trade. Then economic growth is, that is where we started. That is, economic growth is one big plus point that is usually argued. How is economic growth? That is when you produce more. Say, for example, suppose we in India, we produce and export cars. Don't you think car industry will prosper? Similarly, we produce and sell so many goods abroad. It will create jobs. Don't you think the IT sector has created jobs? Okay, IT sector has created millions and millions of jobs in India, isn't it? So it creates job. Everything in economics is like a story. When it creates jobs, it creates jobs for different types of people. Skilled people, semi-skilled people, even for people who can simply operate computers, the IT sector. Whenever production increases, all types and kinds of people, for example, transport, drivers, sweepers, okay, all skilled and semi-skilled and unskilled people get job. And suppose we have a handloom industry which is prospering, and we can export handloom products abroad or handicrafts. What do you think? The ordinary people who are doing this will get their job. It means reduction in poverty. It means their incomes will be more, and income is raising your standard of living. And once you raise your standard of living, there will be more demand for goods and services. Take your knowledge back to chapter 1, unit 2. aggregate demand will be more, and there is spiraling demand for goods and services, more production, more growth, more employment, that virtuous cycle, opposite of vicious circle, that cycle of growth is now, started. It will go on. And there will be greater stimulus for infrastructure. For example, all over India, we find infrastructure, different types of financial infrastructure, banking, insurance, logistics, consultation. Okay, all these are new services that have come. Actually, they were in their rudimentary form, in their backward form earlier, before Indian economy was opened up. And employment generating investments. Okay, and again, the fifth unit that you're going to study is about foreign investments coming to India. Whenever we open up our economy for trade, normally foreign investments will come, which means there are lots of plus points there. Then what about the quality of labor? Again, you have not lived longer to find out, how the quality of labor has changed. Even school children can now operate computers, isn't it? But do you think older people are able to do that? No. The literacy will increase. Okay. Human resource development will take place, because when you have jobs and exposure and literacy levels will rise, then the standards of labor employment. In India, we always had 6 days week, isn't it? Where did this 5-day week come? Actually, it is the impact of, our association globally, isn't it? 5-day, because there are labor standards, environmental standards. Okay, so good quality, the advantage of labor. Laborers have positive effect on labor, and we will be able to produce diversified production. For example, as an agrarian country, agricultural country, we need not focus on agriculture alone. That is why these startups, this MSMEs, medium scale industries, we are giving a lot of importance, because we want to diversify, not to focus only on agriculture. We can diversify. Okay, and suppose there is international trade and it happens, like last year. Okay, suppose there is a shortage of goods, we can import it. If there is a famine, we can import. Okay, if there is excess, we can export. If there is excess supply, what will happen? The price will fall, especially agriculture. Okay, any surplus output can be exported. So what is the advantage? Undue rise and fall in prices. Okay, whenever surpluses are there, undue, this is about price, I am not talking about trade cycles, there will be instability in prices. Some years the prices of tomato will be high. Some years the price of onion will be high. Some years the price of potato will be high. But the next year you find it is low. Suppose it is because excess supply. So if we have excess supply of potato or wheat or whatever it may be, we can dispose it off and ensure that domestic prices are stable. Okay, that is agriculture or whoever is producing excess is not affected by lower prices, because the excess can always be exported. Okay. Now again, as a last point, I'll see, whenever you trade with countries, there is a bond between nations. Okay, and these nations are mutually there to help each other. But these are all good arguments, but some people argue, including economists, say that there are many demerits and many demerits are there. We have to understand, because whenever we study, this is the economist point of view, that is, we don't concentrate only on plus. We look at minus. Definitely there is nothing for which all pluses are there. You have to weigh, trade off, balancing, isn't it? Now, an argument comes, you will be able to think genuinely positives and negatives. Okay, so what are the demerits? Faster we go, economic exploitation. It is easily understood. Economic exploitation. Because domestic entities usually have many disadvantages. That is, domestic producing units will have many disadvantages when compared to advanced countries. For example, poor technology practices, management practices, small size. Think of a pharmaceutical company, which is a multinational company. Do you think our pharmaceutical companies, of course we have good pharmaceutical base, but do you think we'll be able to survive? No, small companies can be easily outperformed, and please keep in mind that there is nothing like a level playing field in the international arena. That is, it will always favor, people have a preference for foreign goods, and when there is a preference, it will threaten the very survival of our industry. Even an efficient company, they will find it difficult, okay, because of predatory pricing strategy. We studied earlier, isn't it? Predatory pricing strategy is cutting cost, price cut, substantial cut in price. But we won't be able to survive in the market because big firms, monopolistic firms, their monopoly power, market power is so high that existing domestic firms will find it very difficult to survive. Okay. Then another thing is, even efficient companies are affected by huge inflow of, capital and production, etc. from our car companies. Take for example, okay, when new cars came, it was very difficult for our old car companies to survive. Many of them disappeared, isn't it? And, entry becomes difficult. Probably those who have studied competition, that is, it is always good to have more firms entering, okay, more firms entering the industry, so that as the number of firms increase, there will be competition. Suppose there is only one firm that is producing bread in your locality, you have to eat the bread produced by that person, isn't it? The moment 10 people start baking bread, okay, there is competition, because now you have choice, right? So such entry is very good for the market, okay? But when huge industries are there, there will be, especially foreign industries, try to sell their goods at low prices. It is very difficult to enter, okay? Because they have such huge production facility, they enjoy so much of goodwill, they enjoy so much of cost advantage that new firms will not be able to enter, okay? Then there are lots of arguments about sustainability of production. How far sustainable is it? Because can we continue like this? Is it sustainable for our environment? Is it sustainable as far as our domestic, our businesses are concerned? Whenever there is international trade, we allow free trade, we want to make somehow an export oriented growth. That is something we wanted when we liberalized. That is, try to export. Even now here, all export promotion policies. Why? Because there is a lot of stress on export. For example, we have special economic zones. So many export promotion, isn't it? Categorization as export oriented units, all that you are studying, okay? It all leads to unsustainable production. Produce fast, produce by exhausting our resources, okay? Right, this is profit driven. Production is always profit driven. And so, what will people do? They will exhaust our natural resources. substantial damage for environmental damage. Then for agricultural economics, agricultural economies like ours, we have, usually agricultural commodities do not command much price in the international market. Whereas imported goods have to be paid high price. So agricultural economies have a great disadvantage because their exports are not very attractive, price-wise, but imports are costly. So what will happen? More money goes out than what is coming. We call it a current account deficit, CAD, current account deficit. Okay, more goods, more expensive goods, more quantities it comes in, and we are not able to procure as much as by exporting our agricultural commodities. That means no surplus, we'll have to incur debt. Okay, and we are, as underdeveloped countries, we are depending a lot on other countries, isn't it? For technology, for different types of goods which we are not capable of manufacturing. So these underdeveloped countries have a risky dependence on other countries. You depend on other countries. And so what happens is, whenever there is a friction, okay, whenever there is a natural calamity, it is very difficult to continue, or a war, it is very difficult to continue that dependence. Then we are in deep trouble, okay. Then big problem is big powers and small powers, okay. Some countries are so powerful that they can dictate. I don't have to tell you who is powerful now. Okay, we will always say that US has greater power, EU, European Union has greater power, and they do dictate things. And the entire world has to, come on, there are veto powers, The entire world has to, the autonomy. What is autonomy? That is, I should be the ultimate authority, not I. A country should be the ultimate authority to decide, sovereign authority to decide what is good for this country. It should not be dictated by, come on, this economic autonomy should not be dictated by other powers. But here, this attack on sovereignty takes place when we are so much connected with the other countries. And also, our cultural identity. What is our cultural identity? We have a very, very old, very rich cultural identity. Right. Okay. But our cultural identity is actually questioned now, right? Our practices are questioned. And if you look back, most of the practices that we follow is, in one way or the other Western. Right. For example, I've seen people always cutting cakes for birthdays when the system came. Like that, our culture, I'm not saying it is bad, but definitely somehow or the other, you are oriented towards, a cultural integration. I will not say it is bad, it is good, but always our problem is we try to imitate what has gone wrong with the West, not what is right with the West. Okay, then adverse effects on consumer, very bad consequences. That is, we have a possible shift to a consumer culture. Okay, then the problem is, we are always in favor of foreign goods. That is our whole taste, pattern of demand. That is the word that is used in book. The pattern of demand. Right now, I said about, getting foreign vegetables, foreign chocolate. Okay, people think in terms of foreign goods, cosmetics, foreign cosmetics competing with Indian cosmetics, foreign perfumes competing with it. So our taste and everything gets oriented towards foreign, right? This is the adverse impact of, and harmful products will be coming. We do not know. We always believe that, whatever is coming from abroad is good, but harmful products can come. Then there are some contagion effect. Contagion. 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 Contagion is actually a disease which spread fast, but that is about trade cycle. A recession in another part of the world will easily get transmitted. Okay? COVID came in one country, it also easily get transmitted into our country. National relations are so high, isn't it? COVID was first reported in Kerala because Kerala is so much, connected with our outside countries. Okay, so I'm not talking about COVID, I'm talking about trade cycles, uncertainties. Then the biggest problem, we do not know what US is going to tell us tomorrow. Okay, don't export your XYZ goods. So much of uncertainty. We did not know what China is going to talk. And China did not know that we are going to behave like this. Okay, are creating uncertainty for Chinese imports, Chinese products and Chinese applications. Okay, this uncertainty. Okay, then there is a lot of uncertainty in our policies. We don't know what policies America will follow tomorrow, because we'll be learning that in the rest of the chapters. So there are lots of implications on welfare of people, because we are always thinking of produce and export. Okay, right? The welfare of people is not what is important for us. It is, export and get money. That is the reason welfare of the people are ignored. Whenever I said about IT people, we can find IT people who are working more than 20 hours. That line of demarcation between home and office, blurred. Okay. So there is a lot of welfare implications of laborers, consumers. Always, exports are so much stressed that real needs of the economy. For example, we need so much of infrastructure, we have so much of literacy shortages, we have so much of health provision shortages, but we are diverting our funds into tradable goods sector for making money by exporting, right? And so, what happens is, many a time we are exporting too much, that there will be shortage. If you are exporting too much, excessive exports, that is what happens is there will be shortage. When there is shortage, because contract is already entered into, when there is shortage, there will be inflation, because there is lack of enough supply. Okay, so this is the biggest problem is, we are concentrating so much on export sector. Our genuine investment needs like infrastructure, health, human resource development, all these are getting lacked. And now that I have said the pros and cons, I think you have an idea, whether foreign trade always does good or bad. Okay. Now we go to so this is the first part. So we have finished now 2 sections of what we wanted to study. The first part is the distinction between domestic trade and international trade, all the complexities and not so easy task due to the complexities involved in it. The second part of our study was argument in favor. Why should we have free international trade? Then the arguments against. That is, we should not allow free trade. So if we are not allowing free trade, then what is, there are 2 policies. The policy of free trade, that is unhindered international trade. That is free trade. Okay. Okay. Whenever we say a single word trade, we do not say international trade. Actually means international trade. Free trade is free action of market forces. For example, I find my raw material the raw material that I need is available very cheap in Nicaragua or Argentina or in the US or in Sri Lanka or in Myanmar or in Bangladesh. I don't procure from, or a consumer good, I don't procure it because it is market forces. I try to buy the lowest possible price. I can sell at a high price elsewhere. I sell at a high price elsewhere. Okay, that is free action of market force. That is free trade. There is no restriction. But unhindered free trade is nowhere. Free trade is good, there are arguments, but no country would permit 100% free trade, right? That is what we are going to study. I said it is like general knowledge in the coming chapters. Okay, now free action of market forces. It can be and can be, I did not say it is, it can be unprofitable for the less developed countries. At the same time, it is profitable also. So we have to weigh and balance, do what is good for the underdeveloped country and don't allow something that is not good for the not so developed country. Then the opposite is protection. Free trade versus protection. What is protection? Protection is, the domestic industries, okay? The domestic producing units. The domestic industries are protected. Okay, that was our policy earlier. Protected from external competition. Okay, protected, not allowing the foreign goods to come to your domestic territory. Okay, that is complete protection. And what will be partial protection? Okay, allowing some competition, but those industries which need to be protected will be protected. Okay, and so I hope it is clear now what are the disadvantages of liberal trade. Totally free trade is nowhere, but liberal trade is there. Okay, there are advantages, there are disadvantages. But we need to know what are the possible advantages and what are the possible disadvantages. I will tell you, this is not exhaustive. There are hundreds of other arguments, but I think with these arguments, you will be able to read and develop. When you read newspaper, you will be able to understand the behavior of other countries, the arguments of other countries. If we accept that argument, what is a possible consequence of that? Okay, so that will sharpen your minds for better thinking. Now we go to the third part, theories of international trade. Theories of international trade. That again is, one whole set of heavy books that are published on international trade. Lots of theories with complex diagrams, complex mathematical derivations, and so what we are studying is only some major theories, just getting in touch with theories, okay? We haven't used any mathematical complication. So actually we are, historically we are studying, right from 16th to 18th century. That is the mercantilist theory. Just to tell you that such theories existed. Okay, then 1817 theory of comparative cost. Then new trade theories are large in number and many theories are not accepted, and so many theories are being tested. So it is not possible for us to study it as a view, but a few theories, learning a few theories is desirable. So we go to the first theory, that is the oldest theory, known as mercantilism. Mercantilism. It is not a theory as such. what was the practice of mercantilism? Now, mercantilism is an ideology which, remained from 1600 to, 1800 and so on. Old idea. The idea is, mercantilists believed that at that it was gold standard, okay? Gold and gold accumulation is the best method of becoming rich. The Gresham's law, that is good money drives bad, all those theories, like accumulate as much gold as possible. Not only gold, precious metals. And mostly precious metal at that time, there was nothing like platinum or all these metals. Precious metal at that time was gold. Accumulate as much gold as possible. Specie, the old term for gold, okay. Accumulate as much as gold. The more gold you have, the richer your country is. It is true also, because gold is what is used for getting goods and services. Gold standard currency is gold. Okay. And so, the more gold you have with you, the richer you are, and the more commodities and services you can enjoy. So, maximize gold. And this is called a policy. Their policy is usually called beggar thy neighbor. Beggar. Beggar means, who is a beggar. But beggar is used here as, as a verb. Beggar. You act in such a way that your neighbor becomes a beggar. Not a beggar. Your neighbor's wealth reduces. Right? And you get wealth. Once your what is lost, the wealth that is lost, the gold or the species that is lost for your neighbor, not lost, that is secured from your neighbor, is your gain. And once you gain this species, you become richer and your neighbor becomes poor. So my gain is loss for the next. Okay, my gain will be loss for the other. That is the meaning of zero-sum gain. What is zero-sum? Okay, if he loses 5, I gain 5. What is in this game? What is a net? Okay, trade is a 0. 0 is the answer, isn't it? His loss is my gain, then it is a zero-sum. Call it. And so trade is a zero-sum game. Let us see what is it advocated. Maximize export. Maximize export. Why should you maximize export? Make other people buy your goods. Okay, push your exports. What do you get in return? Gold. Okay. Minimize import. Why do you want to minimize it? Because the moment you start importing something, you have to give specie or gold. So when you import, you have got to give gold, and so you don't lose your gold when you don't import. And so the policy is maximize, make others buy your products, but don't buy their products. Maximize export, minimize import. Because trade is a zero-sum game. Because if I gain, I can only gain at the expense of my neighbor. Right? Let my neighbor lose, but I have to gain. And that is the mercantilist. What is the earliest theory? Okay. That takes us to the second theory. Just I will touch upon that theory and then give a break. Okay. The second theory, 659. Okay. The second theory is the theory of absolute advantage. Theory of absolute advantage by Adam Smith. The moment I said Adam Smith, free market, free trade. Free market, free trade. Leave everything to the market, everything will function perfect. That is what, laissez-faire, leave everything to the market. So it's free trade. Okay, you trade with other countries, allow all countries to trade with us, let us trade happily with others, free trade and free market and free trade. And what Adam Smith proposed is, we'll come to that finally, international trade is not a zero-sum game. International trade is not a zero-sum game. Okay, with that, please take a break for 5 minutes and you may come back after 5 minutes. Thank you. So welcome back. We wish you happy learning right again, because they were just slightly, it's very simple when compared to your accounts and all, very simple. Regarding queries, as such, I haven't got any query on the subject. Okay. Vandana Singh from Maharashtra says, okay, a new concept is always welcome for her. And Dikshat says, yeah, interested in studying economics, not just for CA intermediate. Okay, very good. I am happy about it. I know that once you start studying economics, you start thinking in a different way. You're a different person altogether. Because the way you look at things will be, much more, from a broader point of view. Okay, so these next 4 units you are going to really enjoy, because it is not dry theories of international trade. It is not incomprehensible, something that you don't understand, but that is something that's happening every day in our day-to-day life, from general knowledge background. Okay, that is why this chapter on international trade is not theory at all. Only these theories, now what we are learning, that will be there. Otherwise, not much theory. So let's go to the theory now. Free market, laissez-faire, leave everything to the market, things will work. And Adam Smith's argument is, international trade is not a zero-sum game. Okay, I said a zero-sum is you lose 5, I gain 5. Okay. Right, you lose your specie, I gain the specie from you. You lose 10 kilograms of 10 pounds of gold, I gain 10 pounds, or you lose 5 pounds of gold when you import goods from me, and I gain the 5 pounds. Then trade is a zero-sum game. But what Adam Smith said is, trade is not a zero-sum game. It is a positive sum game. Okay, it is a positive sum game. When is it positive sum? When somebody gains, right? Someone might lose, but someone might gain. And so altogether, they don't cancel out. Everybody gains because of foreign trade. Everybody gains because of foreign trade. That's why we call it not a zero-sum game. And his theory is the oldest classical theory. Actually, in the book, we haven't introduced most of, the theoretical, names of economists and all that, because we felt that is less important. Right? Question should be on subject matter rather than who is economist. Okay. So, he introduced a concept of absolute cost advantage. Probably many of you have studied this for your plus 2. Absolute cost advantage. What is the meaning of absolute differences? Of course, you know what is cost. What is absolute differences? Absolute difference. For example, somebody's cost is 9 rupees. Somebody else's cost is 5 rupees. Definitely, in absolute numbers, difference in cost is here. And somebody produces at 5 rupees cost is definitely smart. The same thing, other things, everything same. Somebody produces at 5 rupees is definitely, smarter and more proficient than someone who produces for 9. Okay. And so, just as we keep certain assumptions when we study theory, they are not very correct also, but still, just to prove the theories, we'll have to have some assumptions. So what is absolute cost advantage? This guy has, the second person who is producing for 5 rupees, okay, if he is producing for 5 rupees, it shows that output per hour of labor is related to that. This guy's laborers may be, now we don't talk anything in terms of labor alone. Please remember, I have to tell you that Adam Smith is basing his theory on labor theory of value. What is this labor theory of value? Labor theory of value is an ancient theory in economics that labor, even Karl Marx based his theory, Karl Marx is an economist. Karl Marx based his theory on labor theory of value. He went to the extreme of saying that labor alone is productive. No, there are many economists who said at that time, labor alone is productive. What is capital? Accumulated labor. What is entrepreneur? Entrepreneur is another form of labor. And what is land? A passive factor which will not produce anything unless labor is applied. Okay. There are 4 factors of production: land, labor, capital and organization. Then what alone is productive? Labor alone is productive. That is labor theory of value. The value of something is equal to or decided by the labor embedded in it. The value of something is decided by or determined by the value of labor embedded in it. That is the labor theory of value. So please remember, Adam Smith was thinking in terms of labor theory of value. And he says this differences in absolute cost. Okay. That is the number of units of labor hours, output per hour of labor. Okay. That is a very important component of cost. Most important component of cost. Okay. And so he is taking only one factor. Other factors are kept constant somehow. Okay. And so output per unit of labor. And so what is the theory? In simple terms, in one sentence, if you say absolute cost advantage. Absolute cost advantage is the determinant of mutually beneficial international trade. That is the sentence. Absolute cost advantage, we are going to that now, is the determinant of mutually beneficial. What is the meaning of mutually beneficial? Trade benefits you and trade benefits me. Okay. Through trade I am benefited, you are also benefited. That is mutually beneficial. Here in mercantilism, come on, I don't benefit, sorry, one person does not benefit, the other person benefit at the expense of the second person. Okay, and that is zero sum game. So that's why it's not a zero sum, mutually beneficial trade. Okay. Absolutely lower cost of production. Please remember this is for old English. Okay. Absolutely lower cost of production. That is the concept. Absolutely. That is taking the absolute numbers 9, 5 like that. You compare. Okay. A country, his theory goes like this. A country will specialize in the production and export of a commodity. Be with me. It is very simple. The moment you understand, you don't have to read again for writing the exam. It is that simple. But please be with me because the next theory is again based on this theory. Okay. A country will specialize in the production and export of a commodity in which it has absolute cost advantage. For example, if my cost of production, say for example, suppose I am making toys for children. For a given toy, for example, if my cost of production is 5 rupees and another country's cost of production is 8 rupees, then I have an absolute cost advantage. The other person, he has to spend 8 rupees. I can spend 5 rupees and produce. So he will buy from me. He will not produce it because he has no absolute cost advantage. I will produce it for 5 rupees and he will buy it from me for 5 rupees, leave alone other tariffs and all that. Okay, for the time being we keep it because it is free trade, there is no tariff. According to Adam Smith, there should be no tariff because we should allow free trade, no customs duty. So I will produce at 5 rupees. I will give to him, to the second country at 5 rupees. So the second country benefits 3 rupees. On each toy that they buy from me, if they are producing, they would have been spending 8 rupees. But now 3 rupees less because that country is buying from me where I have absolute cost. I will not produce. Say for example, if the second country is good at producing wheat, they can produce 1 kilogram of wheat at 10 rupees, but I can produce wheat only by spending 15 rupees cost. I will not produce wheat. So I will produce toys in which I am good at, my cost is lowest, and the second country B will produce wheat and we will exchange. Okay, they will produce what is best, least cost for them, advantage, absolute advantage for them. I will produce what is absolute advantage for me. I mean the commodity that is absolute advantage, and we will engage in trade. I think right now you understood, isn't it? If I have to produce wheat, I have to spend more money than him in producing. I don't produce. This is the basics of domestic exchange also, isn't it? I cannot produce everything I want. So I produce what I can, okay, the resources I have, and everybody produces and we exchange, and money makes this exchange possible. Okay, money makes this exchange possible, right? And so that is it, market, everybody, you cannot produce everything that you need. So the same principle, okay. So absolutely lower cost of production is the criteria. And here, what is the principle? Principle of division of labor. Division of labor is, I am good at making toys. Okay, I keep making toys. They are good at making wheat, so they make wheat. Principle of division of labor. And I said earlier, the value of goods is determined by measuring the labor. So his theory has only labor as a component of cost, embedded on labor theory of value. So he is taking into account an imaginary, hypothetical. Don't question these numbers. These numbers are not made by me. It is made by Adam Smith. Okay, right. Okay. So hypothetical two countries. Hypothetical countries. You know what is hypothetical countries? We say stories to children, isn't it? Imagine once upon a time there was. Okay, like that. A hypothetical two countries are there. Country A and country B. Okay? And these two countries are producing again hypothetical two commodities. So this is a 2 into 2 model. Okay? Two countries, two commodities. Why is that we take a 2 into 2 model? We have in economics many simplifying assumptions. We know demand is determined by hundreds of variables, isn't it? Hundreds of factors, right? But we keep all the other factors constant and then study the relationship between price and quantity. Like that. This is a very simplified. You remember your two-sector economy in chapter 1, unit 2. Two-sector economy. There are so many sectors, isn't it? We said two-sector economy, three-sector economy, four-sector. We started with that imaginary two-sector economy. So like that, a hypothetical two-sector economy, 2 into 2. Please note it is output per hour of labor. You can open your book if you want, be clear. That is, in your book it is given. Same example. There's only one example I can explain, okay? So, commodity is wheat. At that time, it's not kilograms, bushels of wheat in terms of bushels. Bushels of wheat, and cloth is not in meters, in terms of yards per hour. Bushels per hour and yards per hour. Country A, if 1 unit per hour of labor, that also is questionable, isn't it? How can you measure wheat production per hour of labor, right? We know our production functions depend on so many things and all that, okay? So, 1 output of labor, that is country A can produce 6 units of wheat, bushels of wheat per hour. Okay, imagine some measuring liter or something like that, or kilogram, whatever. Country B can only produce 1. So, who is best at producing wheat? Okay, country A is good because country is not at all good. B is not at all good. 1 hour of labor can produce only 1 unit or 1 bushel of wheat. So country A is having an absolute advantage in wheat. And look at cloth. Country A can produce only 4 meters or 4 yards of cloth, but country B can produce 5 yards of cloth. Very simple. Now your explanation is very simple. Come on. Now the lesson is very simple. Now we have come to a conclusion. What is your conclusion? Okay, be with me. Country A would specialize completely in the production of wheat, and country B will specialize in the production of cloth. Any doubt? Because they are good at wheat, they will produce wheat. These people are better, good at cloth. Absolutely advantageous to produce cloth, they will produce cloth. The story did not end here, because if country A is producing wheat and then eating only wheat, country A will not have cloth. Country B is producing only cloth, they will wear cloth but will not eat it. Okay, but we need both cloth and wheat, and so what is the next step? There should be trade. Okay, from that time also people used to use the word only trade theories. Simply if you say trade, it is international trade. Okay, so there should be trade. Okay, and how will they trade? Okay, can you tell me any easy formula for them to trade? Now again, don't question me because this is what Adam Smith said, right? Country A applies, okay, please remember this 1 unit of labor should be always in your mind. Okay, output per hour, sorry, 1 hour of labor, 1 unit of labor, 1 hour of labor should be in your mind. Country A exchanges 6 wheat for 6 cloth. Okay, 6 wheat. Okay, this is the exchange ratio. That is 6 wheat for 6 cloth. Right? 6 wheat for 6 cloth. Okay, this is the exchange ratio. Who's producing? This is A, this is B. So this is foreign trade. Definitely it is 2 countries. 6 wheat for 6 cloth. Now be with me. Suppose, what is the rate at which the domestic, suppose there is no trade. What is the rate at which trade will take place in A's country? Because labor theory of value, isn't it? Here, if you give 6 wheat domestically, you can get only 4 cloth. Are you with me? That is the domestic exchange rate. Domestic exchange rate is 6 wheat is equal to 4 cloth. No doubt? Right. Domestic exchange rate is 6 wheat is equal to 4 cloth because the value of per hour is this, right? Okay. And so, what is the gain of country A? The gain of country A is, let us write down, the gain of country A is, come on, 2 cloth. Isn't it? the gain is 2 cloth. Domestically they will get only 4, but now they are getting 6 because that is a exchange that did it. Okay. Now, did A gain from this trade? Yes, because they got from, when you compare the domestic ratio, they got 2 cloth. And 2 cloth is half an hour, isn't it? 2 cloth is saving in half an hour of labor. That's good, isn't it? Saving in half an hour labor, which can be used for producing wheat. They can produce 3 more wheat. Okay, half an hour of labor is saved because of this exchange, right? Gain is 2C, half an hour, and that half an hour, if they wish so, it can be. That Adams did not say that. Okay, right? So it is gain for country A. No doubt. Domestic exchange is 6 and 4. Now 6W is equal to 6C. Gain is 2. Will be also gain. Okay. Now 6W, 6 wheat that B gets. Okay. 6 wheat that B gets. Come on. Wheat for here. 6 wheat that B gets require how many hours of labor? 6 hours of labor, isn't it? For producing per hour, they can produce only 1 bushel of wheat. So the 6 bushel of wheat in exchange for 6 cloth that country B got, how many hours? Come on, 6 hours of labor time. Now they are not producing wheat, they are specializing in the production of cloth. They are buying wheat. Okay, after producing cloth and then selling, right? So each one is specializing. So as such, B is not producing wheat, B is producing cloth, A is producing wheat. So if they were producing, it would have, because anyway you need wheat. Without wheat you cannot live. Okay, it requires 6 hours of labor time to produce in country B. And this hours of labor time can now be taken away because you don't have to produce. And concentrate on producing, specialize on producing what? Cloth. So how many units of cloth will you produce? 30 units of cloth. Country B can withdraw the labor from the production of wheat and use it exclusively for the production of cloth. And then 30 units of cloth produced, but 6 units of cloth. Okay, out of this 30 units, 6 units of cloth has to go to country A. That is agreement, isn't it? 6W for 6C. Okay, so it has to go to, come on, right, 6 cloth, that a country B. So it to country A, right? And so what happens? What is the gain for country B? 30 output, out of which 6 has to be given to country A. Okay, 6 wheat you will get, out of which, by giving my 6 cloth. Okay, and what is the gain? Country B has 24C as gain because it is specializing in cloth, and 30 minus 6, 24C, or saves nearly 5 hours of work. Clear? 5 into 5 is 25. Gain is 24. That is why nearly 5 hours. Then, is it a gain? Yes. Gain for A is 2C, isn't it? Sorry, 2W, right? Gain in 2C, and gain for B is 24C. Now you will ask me the question, what is outcome? Outcome is both countries can produce larger quantities of commodities. So the world output is higher. Okay, by specializing, right? But by specializing, they can produce higher output. And by trading, they gain also. But here did you notice? The gain of country A and the gain of country B is not the same. Okay? Country B gains 24. Country A gains only 2. Right? It is unequal. Even if it is unequal, what about the global output? Global output is more, isn't it? And so, suppose these countries do not, just check whether there is a mistake in your book. That is, if they specializes, the sentence like this, if they specialize and do not trade, country A's consumers would have no wheat. Okay, right. Sorry, the country B's consumers would have no cloth. No, country B's, the opposite, right. That is how they are special. Gains may be distributed unequally. But that is okay. Somebody is having more benefit is tolerable, right? But what about the total benefit? Total benefit to the whole world, entire world is, come on, entire world is more, right? 6 wheat means 2 wheat extra. Cloth also, 24 cloth. Okay. That takes us, the first case is clear and you are convinced that trade is not a zero-sum game, trade benefits. The second case is, we are thinking a little more advanced. It is not always, this is not the story always. Because we know some countries will have, a second case. People started questioning, what happens if country A has absolute advantage in production? Absolute advantage is comparing, isn't it? 6.45. Here, absolute advantage here for cloth, here absolute advantage for wheat. But what happens if country A has absolute advantage in the production of both commodities? What is the meaning of absolute advantage for country in the production of both commodities? What is the opposite? Country B has absolute disadvantage in the production of both commodities. Isn't it? If country A has absolute advantage, we have to change the numbers now. Okay. Absolute advantage in the production of both commodities means, come on, you can look into your book and tell me. Therefore, we are going to the next table. Country B, poor country, absolute disadvantage in the production of both commodities. So does it mean that country A is going to benefit? Only country A is going to benefit. You will be surprised to hear the outcome. Okay. Again, this is imaginary numbers, not made by me. Okay. Right. There is still scope for mutually beneficial trade. Still, mutually beneficial trade will be there. Okay. How is it possible? Let's make the output per hour compatible table. Instead of, there is only one slight change that we make. Instead of 5, we write 2. Okay. Instead of 5, you didn't write any small number. You write 2. Okay, but this is the classic standard theory. It is better we don't change it, isn't it? Okay. Output per hour of labor. Now look at the table. Come on, I hope you can see, or you can look into your book. Right? Country A can produce more wheat and more cloth. Imaginary numbers written to prove their argument. All that I agree. But look here. Country A has absolute advantage. Okay. Output per hour of labor Here it is 6 bushel, here it is cloth. But B over B, it have only 1 and 2. So country A is, come on. Now look at the country A and country B. Come on. Here, country B's labor, which is only productive factor. Okay. Country B's labor is 6 times less productive. Okay. 6 times less productive. I will write here. Okay. 6 times less productive. I hope you can see it. 6 times less productive. When 6 bushels are produced here, only 1 bushel is produced. So country B, come on, country B. But what about country 6 times less productive in wheat compared to 4:2, 6:1, right? But country B has a comparative advantage in cloth. Okay, look at country. Okay, country A has comparative advantage. We will not talk. I will not talk about comparative because I haven't mentioned the term comparative so far. B's labor. What about the productivity in cloth? Come on, it is only twice. Okay, twice. You got a 6 times. Here it is 6 times, but here it is only twice less productive. Only half as productive in cloth, but 6 times less productive in wheat. Here half, here 6 times. Which is better? So country B has a comparative advantage. I am introducing a new concept. Comparative advantage. That is, you compare the disadvantage is less here. The disadvantage is more here. The comparative disadvantage is less means you compare 6 and 2. Where is the advantage? Here advantage. Okay. Comparative advantage in cloth. And a comparative disadvantage in wheat. So country B has a comparative advantage in cloth, which is equal to saying a comparative disadvantage in wheat. And what about country A? Country A's comparative advantage, you compare with B, comparative advantage is in production of wheat. Because the absolute advantage is great, 1 and 6. Okay, the absolute advantage is great. That is 6. 6:1 in the but here what you compare these two. For example, 6 and 1, 4 and 2. What is comparative advantage? Is it in wheat or is it in cloth? Already absolute advantage is here, but here 6 times production. 6:1. Here 4:2. Which is better? 6:1. Isn't it? And so that is why country A has a comparative advantage in production and exporting wheat. And let's put these two statements together. Country B has a comparative advantage because the ratio is less here, isn't it? Only 2 times. Okay, comparative advantage in cloth. Okay, country B has a comparative advantage in cloth, and country A has a comparative advantage. You compare, okay, comparative advantage in. So what will they do? What is the outcome for country A? Country A's advantage is greater in wheat. Okay? Country A's advantage, because it can produce 6 times. Here it can produce only 2 times. Okay? And so country A's absolute advantage is greater in wheat. And country A has a comparative advantage in producing and exporting wheat. And country A will specialize in wheat. Okay, country A will specialize in wheat And specialize means then they are not going to produce cloth, right? They will specialize in production of wheat. That means produce only wheat and export some in exchange for countries B's cloth. Now it is clear. B is going to produce cloth. A is going to produce wheat. A will produce wheat and exchange. And what is the outcome for country B? Country B has an absolute disadvantage. Okay. But this absolute disadvantage is smaller in the case of cloth. Absolute disadvantage is larger in the case of wheat and smaller in the case of cloth. And so, absolute disadvantage is smaller is another way of saying comparative advantage. Absolute disadvantage is smaller is opposite the same. It's like saying the same thing. It has a comparative advantage in cloth. It should not go for producing. Disadvantage is so much. So what decision? You produce those things where your comparative disadvantage is less or your comparative advantage is more. Okay. So B will specialize in cloth and export some of its cloth. And specialize in cloth means B is not going to produce wheat. Okay. Because it is a disadvantage. And so finally we come to the market outcome. What is the market outcome? A will produce wheat and the earlier decision is A will produce wheat and B will produce cloth. Right? So we have come to the conclusion. A will produce wheat and B will produce cloth. And now what are they going to do? They have to trade, isn't it? They have to trade. Now that it is clear, you can use your book. They can trade. They have to trade because otherwise the consumers will suffer. Okay. Let's go to our earlier. Okay. 6 wheat for 6 cloth. Okay. Our earlier exchange. That is 6 wheat from A, 6 cloth from B. Gain will be the same because domestically the ratio is the same. It is 6 and 4. We did not change that. So the gain for country A is 2C itself. Because domestic exchange rate is, 6 and 4. Okay, 2C. Country B gets 6W. 6C, give 6C and get 6W. Okay, country B has 6W now. And remember, one was the number here, isn't it? If country B is to produce 6 wheat, it had to spend 6 hours of labor. Isn't it? Because 1 hour of labor will produce only 1 wheat. So country B gets 6 wheat, which would have taken 6 hours of labor time to produce in country B. If country B is producing wheat, it has to spend 6 hours for this 6 wheat. Okay, but it can produce, what is the second part of it? It can produce, using these 6 hours, it can produce, specialize and produce in cloth. How much cloth will it produce? Here it was 2 numbers, isn't it? Sorry, here it was 2 cloth per hour, you remember? So 6 into 2 cloth per hour, country B can now produce 12 cloths. 12 yards of cloth. Are you with me? Okay. Gain of country A is 2C. What did country B do? What should country B do? Produce 12 cloth. Give 6 cloth to A. And the rest is with B, isn't it? Give only 6 cloth and so B will gain 6 cloth. 6 cloth is 3 hours of labor. So gain for B is C. You will be smiling now, isn't it? What a funny calculation with all your accounts and your costing and all that. Okay, but this is logic, isn't it? This this theory is even now, comparative advantage theory is even now accepted. Okay. Now, don't you think the world output is more? Yes. Okay, the world output is more. That is, productivity is more with less number of units of labor, more of by specialization, more of world output. And country A gained, country B also gained, right? Then you will ask me this question, country B is inefficient, but the gain is more for country B. I am innocent, I do not know, that is the theory, okay? Gain will need not be equal, because the sum of these two gains is the world gain or the global gain. So output is more, and so welfare is more. Clear? And so both countries gain, even though this country is so inefficient, it is also gaining. And so what is the final conclusion that you have now? International trade is possible, come on, when countries have, not only when countries have absolute advantage, okay, even then countries have, one country has absolute advantage in both commodities, or another country has absolute disadvantage. The criterion is produce those goods where absolute disadvantage is less, or produce those goods for a country for which comparative advantage is more. Okay, that is it. But you will ask me, why trade for 6C and 6W? That is only one example we took. Any number of examples can be there, but they did not explore those possibilities, but they created a generalization. That is, anything above 4C, because that is what they can produce, isn't it? Anything above 4C, isn't it? Anything above 4 crops. Anything above, yes, it is 6 and 4, 1 and 2. Okay. Anything above 4C I get. Be a gain for A, because if A is producing, they can only produce 4. So if to exchange, if I am getting anything more than 4, it would be a gain. For country B, 6 wheat is equal to 12C, isn't it? 6 wheat is equal to 12 cloth. Country B gains that it can give up anything less than 12. Okay, anything less than 12, because in country B, 6 wheat is 12 cloth, isn't it? So anything less than 12, here they are giving up only 6, okay, just profitable for them. So country B gains to the extent that it can give up less than 12C, because in their place it is 12C, 6 into 2, 12, okay. I give anything less than 12C, then, okay, for 6W, I am gaining. Country B is also gaining. Right? This is the theory. And they can trade, say for example, it is continuing in your book, that is, the profitable trade is 4C less than 6W less than 12C. That is, the range is, between 4 and 12. The range is between 4 and 12. The closer is the exchange ratio to 4, the benefit is less. The more and more C that A can get, it is more and more beneficial. Coming to this side, the less and less of 12C they can give, it is beneficial. I mean for B. Okay, so any ratio is possible, right? Now this is based on Weber theory of value. This is unrealistic. Okay, we have to go slightly faster because we have to be. And so Haberler resolved this issue. A new theory came, that is 1936. The new theory. So after so many years, 1870, 1936. Okay, after so many years, this problem was resolved. Weber theory of value was discarded totally. And so what Haberler did is, he brought the opportunity cost principle. And what is the opportunity cost principle? You remember in your school days you have done an increasing marginal opportunity cost. Increasing marginal opportunity cost in production possibility frontier. And what was that opportunity cost of a commodity? You want to increase there are two goods commodity, you want to increase, increase the quantity produced of B, you have to withdraw resources from A and put it into use in B. X and Y, okay. If you want to produce more X, withdraw resources from Y and use it. The same principle, opportunity cost. That is, the opportunity cost of a commodity is the amount of, there are only two commodities. What is the opportunity? If you want to produce wheat, what is it that you have got to sacrifice? Come on, one more additional unit of wheat, you have to sacrifice. This is wheat, this is cloth. You have to sacrifice cloth. And so, the amount of a second commodity that must be given up. Second commodity. There are only two commodities. If there are second, third, fourth and all, it is the second commodity, not the third commodity. Second commodity that should be given up to release enough resources to produce one extra unit of the first commodity. That is how much of cloth should be given up in order to produce one more unit. That is the principle, opportunity cost. So put it more clearly, the opportunity cost of producing one unit of good X. If this is X and this is Y, one more additional unit of good X is the good Y. That is the amount of labor required for producing one unit of good X, because it divided by the amount of labor required for producing one unit of Y, because the labor has to be taken from here, isn't it? So how much of labor is sacrificed to produce an additional unit of good Y? It is very evident here. For example, here you have, in order to, it's clear, very plain. In order to produce one more unit of wheat, you have to take units of labor which can produce two. You have to sacrifice two cloth. Okay? You have to sacrifice two cloth. Here, you have to sacrifice only 2/3. So, country A will produce more wheat because the sacrifice in terms of opportunity cost is less. Here the sacrifice is 2. Here the sacrifice is less. Only 2/3, isn't it? And so, country A has lower opportunity cost than country B, and so country A will specialize in B and country B will produce or specialize in. Here it is C, 1.5 here. Here you have to give up only 1. If you look the other way, okay. Here for additional unit you have to give up 1, but here you have to give up 1.5. And so country A will come on. Now country A must give up 2/3 of unit of cloth. Let's come to the conclusion. 2/3 of unit of cloth. Okay. Then country B find that is 1 wheat is equal to 2 cloth, and so the opportunity cost of wheat in terms of amount of cloth that must be given up is lower in country A. It is 2 here, but it is only, so we are comparing the opportunity cost here. So opportunity cost is less for country A, and so, right, country A, and so country A will specialize in the production. And this is Habermas theory, okay. And so with that, the 3 theories are over. These are actually old trade theories, we call it, old trade theories. Habermas theory, right. Then comes, that is when it opportunity cost principle comes, labor theory of value is not there. Okay, it is the cost of resources. Resources need not be labor alone, isn't it? And so labor theory of value got ridden, and there are welfare gains, and I think there is potential gain from trade, you are convinced. So international trade is not a zero-sum game. And what is it causing trade? What is it that makes you buy something made in another country? Come on, another country, because the prices are lower, isn't it? Internationally, price is a very important, relative price is a very important one. And what causes this relative prices difference is factor productivity is different. Here the factor can produce more wheat. Okay, let's now move forward, because we need to think about, here we are thinking only about supply. Right, only about supply, because it's a very simple simulated model. We think only about supply. Nobody spoke anything about demand. Do they really want this much of wheat, cloth, this much of wheat? Right. Now, it only makes a statement that countries differ in cost. Why they differ in cost? It does not answer. And so, this is further modified, that is by what is known as Hatcher all-in theory of trade. Okay, old theories of trade. You can open your book if you want. That's very simple. Okay. The Ricardian theory and the Habermas theory, okay, Hexter-Olin theory, even though it runs to pages, don't worry, it is a very simple model. You need only, actually this is a highly complex, long theory. We have put it in very simple terms, because what is important is for a chartered accountant is not calculation, understanding concepts. Okay, understanding concepts and why and how trade is caused, right? Now that you read a newspaper, okay, you know that such and such a country is exporting cardamom to our country. Then you can come to the conclusion that, cardamom is cheaply produced in their country, so we can get it cheap. That's why they are selling cardamom. They have an advantage in producing that. Okay, for example, we are coming to that, Hexter-Olin theory. How shall we start? Come on. Hexter-Olin theory. At 8 o'clock, I will give you a 3 minutes break. Theory. Before each break, one theory is just getting introduced, right? Good. Hexter-Olin theory of trade. Hexter-Olin, very famous theory. Okay. Two people, HO model, a very popular theory of international. HO model. Please don't think that this is HO model. I mean, this is only a very simplified version of HO model you study, but concept is clear. Okay, this is called the factor endowment theory of trade. Factor endowment theory of trade. Fact endowment of trade. For every word in English, there is a meaning. You learn the title properly, the rest of it will. Okay. Right. As I always ask students, what is the law of variable proportion? They know everything that is written below it, but don't know what is law. Why is it called? This because the proportion in which factors are combined is changed. That is variable. That vary the proportion in which factors are combined. That's why it is known as law of variable proportions, isn't it? Returns to a factor because only one factor is changed. Okay, so there is a meaning in every title, every word. So what is factor endowment? Sometimes you say, this Anil Ambani is endowed with business skill. Okay, endowed with business skill. Our Prime Minister is endowed with skills to be friendly with other nations. Manmohan Singh is endowed with qualities of a good economist. Right? Nirmala Sitharaman has endowed with power of analytical powers, right? So that is the meaning of endowed. Okay. So factor endowment. Which factor are you endowed with? Okay, this is known as modern theory, also known as, because these are all the theories. Now it's modern theory. It's Heckscher, Olin, Samuelson. Paul A. Samuelson also has contributed. These are the different names. Why it is given is sometimes for the exam, you know, these different names. Take a break for 4 minutes and we'll be back at 4 minutes after 8. Okay, take a break. we have finished the old trade theories and now we are going to the new theory known as Heckscher-Ohlin theory. Please note the spelling. HO model, H for Heckscher, O for Ohlin. Okay. Then factor endowment theory. It's given in your book. It's factor endowment theory. Endowed. I think I've told you the meaning of endowed. Right. Factor with which you are endowed. Then Heckscher, Ohlin, Samuelson. You have heard about Paul S. Samuelson, who is a very popular economist, right? Definition and all you have heard, okay, right? What is the meaning of factor endowment? I have already discussed. That is bestowed, conferred, blessed, given, okay? That is factor endowment. And what is a country's factor endowment? We have not yet gone to the theory. A country's factor endowment is the overall, you cannot change it, you have to use the same words, the overall availability of usable resources, okay, usable resources including natural and man-made means of production. Please note, it's for production, not for consumption. Okay, right, please note it should be usable, it should be available, right? Then it includes both natural and man-made means of production. Means of production are anything that is useful in production. Okay, so suppose a country has so much of natural resources and capital that is man-made. You know, capital is man-made means of production. Natural resources. Actually, the total resources are either natural resources or man-made resources. Okay, and this is a country's factor endowment. In this theory, only two important factors are considered. Only two important factors. The first one is labor and the second one is capital. You will see mostly in all the production possibility, mostly in all the production functions, we consider only two factors of production. Even in modern, for example, if you consider isoquants, okay, or a factor 1, factor 2, labor and capital we consider. So we consider only two factors of production, that is labor and capital, okay. So, most important factors are labor and capital. Okay. Again, we are going to two-country model. Why do you restrict to two countries? In HO theory also, we have a two-country model, right? But not two commodities. Okay. Two-country model. So, let's say for example, country A and country B, whatever name you want. These two countries have identical production function. Now we are coming to little more theoretical words, okay? Identical production function. Identical production. And what is production function? Production function is the functional relationship between input and output. Functional relationship. I won't make it complicated. I'll tell you, if you make chapati in your house, there is one particular production function you use. You make use of so much of atta, oil or whatever different things, that will give rise to 25 chapati. Production. Relationship between. So much of inputs you use, output is created. Okay, identical. Both countries have identical production function. Okay, actually, you have to understand here, please keep writing if you want because nothing is explained in the book as such. Identical production function means both are using, the factors that are used, factor combinations and all is the same. Okay, both countries. For example, a combination of x1, x2, x3, etc. will give rise to this much of output. That is the meaning of identical production function. Identical preferences. Identical preferences for this country. What goods will be produced? Identical preferences. But one problem is factor prices are different. What is the meaning? There are only two factors. That is, one is labor and the other is capital. Okay. These factor prices are different. Tell me, what decides in economics the price of something? Scarcity, relative scarcity, demand and supply, isn't it? Relative scarcity of factors decide. Those factors which are scarce will command high prices. Why is the rate of interest in India is so high, but the rate of interest in developed countries is less? Because availability of finance is less, capital is less, the price of capital is more. Why is that labor has lower wages in many parts of the country of India? Why? Because labor is not scarce, labor is abundant. Supply of labor is less or demand for labor is less. Okay. And so different factor prices is decided by the quantity, the scarcity and availability of factor. And if production function is the same, the way you produce is the same, but your factor prices are different, okay, your factor prices are different. I'll tell you one example. There is a baker A and a baker B. Okay, A uses imported factors, very sophisticated pizza making machines. They both are producing the same thing. Okay, he is also using making pizza, but this guy is air conditioning his premises. All those cost is high. Okay, and this guy is not using imported, right? So what happens is, when factor prices, or this guy is using cheap labor, this guy is using very costly labor, this guy is having many consultants for his recipe, this guy is knows it on his own, right? Factor prices are different. When factor prices are different, their cost, production function is the same. This much atta and everything will give rise to this much pizza. For both people, pizza will be produced, but cost function will be different. Production function, everything is the same. All combinations of pizza, electricity that is consumed, all combinations of inputs, everything is same for the same pizza, for one pizza. But this guy's factors are very highly priced. Their laborers are very highly priced. His capital is highly priced. So, different cost. Okay, different cost function. I hope it is clear. Different cost function. Now, why comparative advantage in cost of production? This is, in this theory, exclusively differences in factor endowments. Differences. Two countries, here it is two countries. We have forget about this, that is, I said only as an example, that you should not be keeping in mind. I just wanted to tell you how cost functions will differ because production functions are the same. Right, production function is the same, but cost can be different because of differences in factor prices. Okay, and what is the comparative advantage in cost of production? Differences in factor endowment. Factor endowment, usable resources available. I said two important factors are considered, labor and capital. So according to this theory, you cannot leave even a single sentence because each sentence has a meaning. Okay, I will not be able to explain each and every sentence, you have to read, please. International trade is something like a special case of interregional trade. It's given in your book. International trade is a special case. Yeah, in page 412 it is given. International trade is a special case of inter-regional trade. What is inter-regional trade? Take the case of India. There is a lot of trade taking place. Less of wheat is produced in South India. More of rice is produced in South India because different factor endowment. Okay, factor endowments in South India is not the same as factor endowments in North India. Factor endowments in Northeast is not the same as the factor endowment in Southeast. Okay, so regions produce according to their factor endowment. Clear? Those places like Bihar, Bengal, those sides which are good at minerals and metallic resources, they are in for mining. They mine and they produce minerals and metals. Okay, and so different regions have different factor endowments. Different goods have different production function, isn't it? All the coal mining production function is not the same as handloom, right? So different production function. For example, handloom is based, the production function of handloom is labor intensive nature of production. Whereas a computer industry is highly capital intensive. Okay, so different goods have different production function. And why trade takes place? North India, you produce wheat because you are endowed with all the weather. Okay, black cotton soil is available. In school we have studied, isn't it, somewhere near Maharashtra and the Deccan Plateau, etc. So they produce it. Their factor endowments are suitable for that. So some places, now we are diverting from this regional trade. Why regional trade takes place? Because there are differences in factor endowments. International trade is also taking place because of differences in factor endowment. For example, we have taken only two factors, capital and labor. Some countries are capital abundant. Europe, developed countries, UK, right? US, right? You take all those developed countries, they are capital abundant. Some countries are labor abundant. For example, the northern hemisphere. Okay, the northern hemisphere is supposed to be capital abundant and the southern hemisphere is supposed to be capital scarce, that is labor abundant. Okay, so different regions have different capacity to produce different commodities. The southern globe, for example, where India, parts of Asia, all these four countries. That is the north-south divide, right? Where all these, our population is high, we are abundantly blessed with people, but less blessed with capital. So, we have certain capabilities to produce labor intensive products. For example, anyway, that's why you take, say, for example, Rajasthan, for example, I really do not know exactly, where you get a lot of embroidered crochet and things like that, even in Calcutta, like Bengal. Where do you get, woven things, handicrafts, handmade things? This labor is abundant. So they have a capacity to produce it because it is intricate work like Kashmiri shawl. Okay, intricate work. They have the capacity because they are endowed with that. Okay, so different capacity differs. And what is the cost of trade? Differences in relative prices. Cost of trade is actually differences in relative prices of goods. What is the meaning of relative price? Price of one good in relation to the price of another good. That's all. Relative prices. The mobiles produced in China, mobiles produced in India. Okay, you look at the prices, relative, you find the price of this, okay. Raw materials. The price of raw material in India, the price of raw material in another country. Intermediate goods, you compare the prices. And you go and buy in place where, you buy from places where it is lower priced. And exports actually depends upon endowment of resources. Let's come back to labor abundant country. Theory is very simple, looks very simple. We have, suppose there is a labor abundant country. What is a labor abundant country like ours? Lots of labor available. Now, what about the cost of, what is the advantage for a labor abundant country? They can go for labor intensive products, okay. Labor intensive, that which uses more labor than capital, okay. Labor intensive processes like weaving, as I said earlier, okay. And what will capital intensive countries do? Capital abundant countries do? Capital abundant countries will produce capital intensive goods, okay. Clear? Capital intensive cost advantage, because capital is available, the price of capital will be less, capital will be cheap, and so they go for producing capital. Because labor is abundant, labor is cheap, the cost of production, okay, there is a cost advantage when you use labor intensive method. Okay. So it is endowment, whether labor and capital. So those countries which are labor abundant, very simple, isn't it? Labor abundant has a cost advantage in producing labor intensive products. They will produce labor intensive product and specialize and export labor intensive products. Those who are capital abundant, the price of capital or the cost of capital will be less, and they will produce capital intensive goods, and these people will buy capital intensive goods from them, and those people will buy labor intensive goods from, right. You know, lots of practical examples are there. Lack of time I won't be. Why is that call centers are established in India? American companies establish call centers in India, right? Reason is it is a labor intensive job and they can buy cheaply all labor intensive jobs here, okay, and we produce labor intensive jobs. So there are two theorems, okay, associated with that. Heckscher-Ohlin trade theorem is what we finished, okay. Heckscher-Ohlin, that is, countries specialize according to their factor endowment, and differences in cost is caused by differences in factor endowment, and production is oriented according to factor endowment. They produce exchange cell, okay. The second theorem is known as factor price equalization theorem. This is slightly tough. Actually, it's a big theory, but it is written in a very simple way. Factor price equalization theorem. First, understand the meaning of the title. It's a theorem which says that there is equalization of something. What is getting equalized? Factor prices. So simply said, it only means, without going into the theory itself, we can analyze its heading. That is how you study. That is, factor prices are different for some reason. Okay, factor prices are different into situations, but somehow due to, we are going to learn that factor prices get equalized. Okay, factor prices get equalized. That factor which had a lower price will get equalized with the factor that had a high price. Factor price equalization. Okay, and how does this happen? Very simple. Heckscher-Ohlin's trade theorem is a country tends to specialize in the export of a commodity whose production requires intensive use of its abundant resources, and imports a commodity whose production requires intensive use of its scarce. Yeah. Okay. Now, After that, we go to factor price equalization. Now, international trade, be with me, it is a slightly, some words are not very okay. International trade tends to equalize factor prices between trading nations. There are two countries, A and B. Before that, let us go and examine what about product prices. Product prices will become equal or it's just a fact. Equalizes product prices by arbitrage. That is, if price in one country is high and price in one country is low, people will start selling in the high priced country, supply increases, and finally prices will become equal. Right? Like that, international trade, this is very, it is going to a roundabout way actually. International trade equalizes the absolute return and relative return. Relative return is return of one factor in relation, price of capital in comparison with price of labor. Absolute return is price of that price of labor increases, price of capital increases. These are two words, absolute and relative returns of what? Homogeneous factors. Factors of production must be homogeneous. Highly skilled labor will get definitely high prices, but low skilled people will get, but homogeneous factors, if these two countries have similar factors, homogeneous factors, finally their prices. The wages of homogeneous laborer, same type of laborers in country A and country B, same type of capital, financial capital it can be, finance, money can be, okay, same type of homogeneous capital, the returns on these, the wages or the returns will be the same in all those nations which are trading. Very pure, very fantastic, isn't it? That is, factor prices will become same. That is, a qualified person working with the same working in US with the same quality, and if India and US trade same quality, same type of a homogeneous factor, will get the same return. Let's examine how. Okay, it is a very simple thing, but some complex words are there. Okay, prices are equalized. We already mentioned that. Foreign trade eliminates price differences in factors. Factor prices are okay. Trade in good is a perfect substitute of trade in factors. Trade in good equalizes price, like trade in good also equalize factor prices. When trade opens, one example with that I can stop. When trade opens, what happens is, for example, suppose India is producing lot of handloom. Just one example, lot of handloom. What will happen if India is increased demand for labor? Isn't it? So, handloom industry is flourishing because we are good at handloom, okay? And we are producing handloom and selling. So, lots of demand for labor. See, remember, we are not selling, we are not good at capital intensive. So, we are not producing much capital intensive, but there is a lot of demand for labor. Example given in your book is clothing, okay, clothes, ready-made garments, okay, we are making ready-made garments. So what will people do? People will shift from other industries, capital intensive industries, and shift to the clothes manufacturing industry, okay, and so more labor, we need a lot of people in the clothes manufacturing because it's expanding industry. And you know what happened is, we can't get people, which means sufficient people cannot be obtained, which means price of labor will go up. That is, wages will go up. That is sure, isn't it? More people are wanted, then we have to pay more and more wages, isn't it? Because people should be People should be, willing to work. They should be trained enough to work in this. So wages will go up. When wage goes up, what about the price of capital, the relative price? Wage goes up when compared to capital. Capital's return, relative price increases. Then that means the relative price of capital has come down. Okay, the relative price of capital has come down. Now producers will think, why should we employ labor which is very highly priced? Instead of that, why not we employ capital in the clothes industry also? Right? So, the capital intensive sector is already capital intensive. The clothes, that is labor intensive sector, also becomes capital intensive. Okay, and more capital will be used by the labor intensive method. And there are many other theories behind it. When you use more and more capital, okay, you remember the law of diminishing marginal utility? Like that, marginal productivity, you remember marginal productivity theory is there. As you have more and more, as you use more and more of units of this input, say capital input or any factor, its productivity keeps on declining. Okay, its productivity, this is the MP curve. Productivity keeps on declining. Okay, productivity keeps on declining. This is marginal productivity of capital declines because more of capital is now used. Why? Because labor price is high. Okay, and wages increase. It depends on. Now, actually, when marginal productivity of labor increases because marginal productivity of capital has come down, okay, and when marginal productivity of labor is high, what happens is wage is always decided by marginal productivity, and so wages will pick up. And what is happening actually? Capital whose price was high has come down, and labor whose price was lower has become equalized with that of capital, and so factor prices are equalized. Right? The theory is over. When the prices of output of goods are equalized because of international trade, we continue, the prices of factors will also rise. And 1 minute, and I think I will look at your doubts because one theory I can keep for tomorrow. Let me look at the doubts. No queries today. Good. Then I can definitely finish. Oh, I'm happy. Why no queries? Either you did not understand or you understood everything. One of the two. Right. So that takes us to the last. Very good. We can finish. Okay. Now in your book, the comparison is given, table 413. Please read it today itself. The comparison. This was asked once, the question. Right. This question. Theory of comparative cost and model. Now where did we stop now? We said that texture role in theory, that is two versions, right? Okay, trade theorem and factor equalization theorem. Okay, prices of factors will become the same. But one thing is there, the last theory I said, factor equalization theorem is applicable only if this type of specialization of labor intensive goods by labor, that is the first theory, hold goods. That is those countries which are having labor abundance will produce labor intensive, and those countries which are capital abundant will produce. Only then this theory will also hold good. Okay. Now we go to the new trade theory. It is not one theory. Okay. It is a number of theories. Okay. New trade theories actually it is, but new trade theory, right? It is a label that summarizes many international trade theories in terms of advantages of specialization that arising from increasing returns. I'll tell you, when large scale production, think of multinational corporations. Okay, these theories are generated in advanced countries. Think of multinational corporations that have production facilities in different countries. What happens when scale of production increases? Come on, increasing returns to scale. That is diminishing cost. Because there is imperfect competition. If there is imperfect competition, it doesn't work. Okay. So world over, these old theories are discarded, and we have, a very phenomenon that you know is India makes cars, imports car. Japan makes cars, Japan also import. US makes cars, US also imports car from China. China is making, China is buying also. So similar goods are exported and imported. Not because they don't have the technology, right? Because they have the technology, they are equally good, these countries. They are from the beginning itself, a priori, okay? They do not a priori, that is the word used in the theory. They do not a priori differ in terms of technology. They are good at technology, both are good at technology. Both are good at endowments. They are advanced countries. Now this is an intra-sectoral trade, not an inter-sector trade. Okay, intra-sectoral trade between countries with similar characteristics. Japan trading with US, China trading with US. Okay, and this type of trade, that is car for car, mobile for mobile. Okay, and this is explained in 2 points. One is economies of scale. Why are they trading like that? Why is that they want to produce cars? Korean cars are coming to other countries because of economies of scale. When multinational, big technologically advanced countries use a lot of technology and produce on a large scale, they have advantages of large scale. That is, they produce more and more cars. Each car becomes less and less costly, and price remaining the same. Their profits keep on increasing. That is economies of scale. Decreases the cost. Price, because there is imperfect competition. You know, this branding. There are lots of other theories associated with that. Volkswagen, yeah, it has got a brand name, isn't it? Range Rover, it has got a brand name, right? Okay, Hyundai, it has got another brand name. So they try to sell, in other countries, advertising imperfect competition, monopolistic competition. Okay, slight differences in cars. All these cars are one and the same. Basically, they serve the same function. Okay, but through advertisement, through branding, through minor differences, through color, they are made to look different. And so they produce on a large scale, sell on a large scale, make a lot of profit. The second one is network effect. That's a very important research that's going on, network effect. That is, if all of you got mobile phones and laptops, that is why this class is going on now. Isn't it? The utility of the class increases when the number of users increase. If you have WhatsApp and your friends also have WhatsApp, your utility for your telephone increases. So that is network effect. Okay. When others are having bandwagon effect, the desire to be like others. Okay. So the utility of any output is increased when others also produce similar output. So world trade tends to be something like, everybody, not poor countries. Poor countries are not within the purview of this. That is technologically advanced, very capable countries whose capital is very large, whose technology is very large, whose research is very large. These people tend to trade in similar commodities. Why this trade is taking place? There are many versions of the same theory. And all these versions together is actually, this is very latest theories, but not fully accepted, theories. But there are a set of theories considering this intra-industry trade. Inter-industry trade is different. Okay, for example, you produce car and I produce chemicals. You want chemicals, I sell you chemicals. I want car, I buy car from you. Inter-industry. But the other one is, I produce car, you also produce car. I produce chemicals, you also produce chemicals. But there is trade taking. That's very clear, okay? And that is why this phenomena is examined. Let's now look back and see what we studied. First of all, we studied, come on, the difference between many points we mentioned. Okay, I have included all those points in the PowerPoints that I have forwarded. Right, please go through it. Difference between domestic trade, internal trade and international trade. What is the major difference? Okay, what is the impact when compared to domestic trade on our exchequer, all those things. Then secondly, we have done, there are people who say free trade is good. There are people who not free trade. Liberal trade is good. There are economists who say liberal trade is not. Okay, not only economists, NGOs, politicians, governments, everybody. Okay. So we were examining some arguments for liberal trade and arguments against liberal trade. Okay. Dispassionately. That is, we did not have join party with anybody. We have dispassionately, objectively, we have mentioned these are the things. Okay. Then we went to the theory of absolute advantage, theory of comparative advantage, Habermas opportunity cost theorem. Then we went to Heckscher-Ohlin theorem, the new trade, that is Heckscher-Ohlin theorem, factor equalization trade theorem, factor equalization theorem, and just a glimpse at new trade theory. And with that, we wind up today. Thank you for your patient listening, because all the time I am talking, and I hope it will be of some use in your career. Okay. Thank you so much. Goodbye. See you tomorrow with Unit 2. Little more adventurous actually. Okay. Little more broader aspects of international. We deal with trade policy in the next class. So thank you so much and goodbye.